February 8, 1945. A skeletal man weighing 40 kilograms grips the control yoke of a 14-ton Nazi Heinkel He-111 bomber. Behind his pilot seat, 9 starving prisoners cling to the bare metal fuselage. They wear striped cotton rags. They possess no flight suits, no parachutes, no radio communication. Outside the shattered cockpit glass, armed SS guards sprint across the concrete tarmac, firing automatic weapons. A high-velocity bullet pierces the right landing gear. A rubber tire violently detonates under immense atmospheric pressure. The runway concrete blurs underneath. The perimeter fence rushes closer at 100 kilometers per hour. 10 dying men are attempting to steal the camp commandant's personal military aircraft directly from Hitler's most heavily guarded island fortress. The mathematical probability of success is 0. Welcome to Peenemünde, a classified Baltic Sea island facility existing for a single strategic objective: the mass production of the V-2 ballistic missile. This is the birthplace of the world's first guided rocket weapon. The laborers hauling the raw materials and assembling the complex combustion chambers are exclusively concentration camp inmates. They are categorized by the Third Reich as expendable biological machinery. The architectural security is absolute and unforgiving. The primary perimeter consists of high-voltage electrified fencing carrying lethal current. Beyond the steel wire lies the freezing Baltic Sea. Armed patrol boats maintain a continuous 24-hour maritime blockade. High-intensity searchlights scan the dark water surface every 10 seconds. The local water temperature guarantees lethal hypothermia within 6 minutes of submersion. 3 days prior, 2 desperate inmates attempted a nocturnal aquatic escape. The SS intercepted them 20 meters from the shoreline. Both men were hanged from the central gallows at dawn. All 800 prisoners were mandated to stand at attention and observe the bodies, suspend for 6 consecutive hours. The mechanical message required no verbal translation. Human life terminates here. The rocket technology secrets must never cross the perimeter. Mikhail Deviatev operates within the Death Brigade. This is the terminal operational assignment. Every morning at precisely 0500 hours, armed guards march his unit onto the active airfield. Their protocol dictates manually filling bomb craters caused by heavy Allied airstrikes and extracting unexploded 500-pound ordnance from the shattered concrete. They operate without protective gear. A single misstep, an unbalanced load, a micro-vibration translates to instant atmospheric vaporization. The daily caloric intake equals 1 bowl of watery turnip fluid and a 200-gram crust of synthetic sawdust bread. Mikhail's ribcage protrudes sharply against his translucent skin. The standard biological failure rate for a Death Brigade laborer is 21 days before total systemic collapse. The Eastern Front is collapsing. Soviet mechanized infantry advances closer every 24 hours. The SS protocol for an imminent Allied breach is total demographic liquidation. When the Red Army breaches the mainland perimeter, every slave laborer on Peenemünde will be executed and incinerated to erase the V-2 program footprint. Waiting for liberation is merely a slower execution. But Mikhail possesses an invisible anomaly. He is not the expendable infantryman registered as Nikitenko. He is Senior Lieutenant Mikhail Petrovich Deviatev, a highly decorated Soviet Air Force fighter ace. He commanded an Aerocobra interceptor. He documented 9 confirmed aerial victories against the Luftwaffe before anti-aircraft flak fragmented his fuselage over Lviv in July 1944. The Nazi High Command automatically executes captured enemy aviators upon positive identification. Recognizing the execution protocol, Mikhail executed a dead-drop identity swap during a chaotic transit shuffle. He acquired the blood-stained identity tags of a deceased infantry private. For 14 months, he has buried his tactical aviation neurology beneath the persona of a mindless, starving laborer. Mikhail isolates a systemic vulnerability: human biological scheduling. Every solar cycle at exactly 1200 hours, a mechanical siren outputs a high-decibel acoustic signal across the entire island. Lunch. The psychological conditioning of the German garrison is absolute. Engineers, pilots, perimeter guards, and SS officers simultaneously abandon their operational stations to march toward the central mess hall. For 30 precise minutes, the high-security airstrip experiences a catastrophic personnel vacuum. Watchtower guards lower their optics. Sentries prioritize their daily rations. Parked centrally on the active tarmac is a twin-engine Heinkel He-111 bomber. It belongs exclusively to the camp commandant. It sits fully fueled, unattended. The mechanical paradox forms in Mikhail's mind. Defeat a multi-billion-dollar missile installation by walking directly into its central nervous system during a 30-minute digestion window. The operational blueprint requires coordinated manpower. Mikhail cannot manually override the aircraft systems, detach external chocks, and neutralize potential perimeter guards alone. His muscle mass has deteriorated by 60%. He initiates a covert recruitment protocol. He scans the death brigade for inmates exhibiting a specific psychological matrix, absolute desperation combined with residual physical utility. He carefully selects Ivan Krivanogov, a former combat infantryman harboring a sharpened metal shard extracted from concrete debris. He recruits Vladimir Sokolov, an aviation mechanic capable of understanding fluid dynamics and combustion manifolds. Pyotr Kuturgin, possessing high-speed situational processing. 6 others follow. 10 men total. They finalize the operational pact in acoustic whispers behind the latrine block. Total synchronization. 0 extraction variables. If one unit fails, all 10 units hang from the gallows by sunset. February 8th, 1945. The ambient temperature hovers near freezing. 1200 hours. The acoustic siren triggers. 10 skeletal figures gripping iron shovels alter their assigned trajectory. They march in a staggered diamond formation toward the parked Heinkel bomber. The surrounding tarmac systematically empties as gray uniformed personnel migrate toward the canteen. A single variable remains. One armed sentry stands near the aircraft's port wing. His Mauser rifle hangs loosely on a leather strap. He registers the approaching work detail. His facial muscles contract in confusion. He raises his left palm in a universal halt command. His right hand drops toward his weapon receiver. Ivan Krivanogov accelerates. He closes a 2-meter gap in 1.4 seconds. The sharpened iron shard arcs upward, penetrating the sentry's carotid artery. The guard's vocal cords sever before acoustic transmission. He collapses onto the concrete. Pyotr Kuturgin intercepts the falling rifle. He violently extracts the blood-soaked gray tunic from the twitching corpse in 8 seconds flat. He slides his emaciated arms into the oversized sleeves. He assumes a rigid vertical posture beside the aircraft, manufacturing a visual camouflage for distant watchtowers. They have purchased exactly 60 seconds of invisibility. Mikhail sprints to the bomber, vaults onto the aluminum wing structure. He grips the cockpit entry hatch handle. He applies maximum downward kinetic force. The handle remains static. It is locked. 14 months of tactical calculations, an assassinated perimeter guard, and 9 dying accomplices are currently blocked by a primitive mechanical latch. Panic threatens to override logic. The mechanical latch relies on a steel pin housing designed to withstand extreme aerodynamic pressure. Mikhail calculates the structural tolerance of the surrounding aluminum access panel. He locates a 4mm manufacturing gap where the metal meets the primary fuselage frame. He wedges his raw, bleeding fingers into the freezing aperture. He applies maximum localized torque, utilizing his entire body weight as a lever. The cold aluminum yields, snapping backward with a sharp acoustic crack. Jagged metal edges slice deep into his right forearm, exposing muscle tissue and severing capillaries. He ignores the biological trauma. He thrusts his arm deep into the internal mechanical cavity. His fingers map the complex steel linkages blind. He bypasses the primary locking cylinder and locates the secondary emergency release lever. He applies 40 pounds of downward kinetic force. A heavy metallic click echoes across the tarmac. The pressurized seal of the cockpit canopy violently releases. He throws his 40-kilogram skeletal frame into the left-hand pilot seat. The instrument panel surrounds him. An overwhelming array of complex dials, analog switches, and hydraulic levers. Every indicator is labeled in Gothic German script. Fuel pumps, throttle quadrants, magnetos, mixture controls, engine primers, propeller pitch toggles. He has never operated a Heinkel He-111 bomber before this exact moment in space and time. His entire operational knowledge of this 14-ton machine is purely theoretical. But for 14 months, while hauling shattered concrete, Mikhail scavenged cracked instrument plates from crash sites. He analyzed the exact mechanical sequencing of German aviation engineers by maintaining close proximity and executing auditory surveillance. He memorized the precise acoustic click of every switch. He initiates the startup sequence from memory. Fuel valves snap open. High-octane aviation fluid floods the primary combustion chambers. Magnetos engage, arming the ignition circuits. He advances the twin throttle quadrants exactly 3 centimeters forward. Fuel mixture levers are locked to maximum rich. He activates the primary electrical ignition toggle. Zero response. The twin Jumo 211 V12 engines remain completely static. No combustion, no mechanical vibration. He frantically scans the central electrical gauges. The battery indicator needle rests perfectly at 0 volts. The circuit is dead. The German security protocol requires the physical removal of the external electrical power card after every flight. Without 24 volts of external direct current injected into the starter motors, the 14-ton bomber is nothing but a static steel coffin. The 30-minute lunch window is rapidly expiring. Hundreds of armed SS personnel are currently consuming their final calories exactly 300 meters away inside the central mess hall. Mikhail reverses his trajectory. He drops from the elevated cockpit back down to the freezing concrete. He sprints toward a nearby wooden maintenance shed located 50 meters off the primary taxiway. 2 starving prisoners follow his vector without requiring verbal commands. They breach the shed doors. They locate a standard Luftwaffe external battery trolley. It is a solid block of lead-acid cells weighing over 150 kilograms. They grip the freezing steel handles. They push the massive dead weight across the open tarmac. The solid rubber wheels catch on concrete imperfections and bomb crater patches. They burn their final cellular glycogen reserves. Their heart rates spike to 190 beats per minute. They force the trolley directly beneath the Heinkel's fuselage port. Mikhail grabs the thick copper cables. He aligns the heavy metal connectors with shaking hands and clamps them down into the external power receptacle. He scrambles back up the aluminum wing and drops into the pilot's seat. Ignition sequence 2. The electrical starter motors receive the high voltage current. They violently engage. The port engine coughs, discharging a massive cloud of unburned aviation fuel and white smoke. The starboard engine immediately detonates. Both 12-cylinder engines roar to life, generating a combined output of 2,400 horsepower. The acoustic signature instantly exceeds 120 decibels. The mechanical vibration shakes the entire airframe, rattling the glass canopy. The stealth phase of the operation is permanently terminated. Every single German unit on Pinemund registers the massive acoustic anomaly. The 30-minute operational window immediately collapses to 30 seconds. Through the plexiglass, Mikhail observes the immediate systemic reaction. The mess hall doors burst open. Dozens of gray uniformed SS officers and Luftwaffe pilots sprint onto the tarmac. Sidearms are drawn from leather holsters. Orders are screamed across the concrete. Mikhail shoves both throttle levers forward to maximum military power. The twin 3-blade propellers bite the freezing air, generating immense forward thrust. The bomber lurches ahead. The heavy rubber tires rumble over the concrete. But the thrust vector is fatally asymmetrical. The port engine is generating 10% more torque than the starboard engine. The 14-ton machine violently veers to the right. Instead of rolling straight down the designated taxiway, the aircraft carves a chaotic, spinning arc across the tarmac. The propellers kick up a massive storm of dust, ice, and shattered concrete. Mikhail wrestles the heavy control yoke and stamps on the left rudder pedal. His depleted, starving musculature cannot generate the required physical counterforce to correct the massive aerodynamic yaw. Behind him, German infantrymen drop to one knee at the runway perimeter. They open fire. 9mm projectiles strike the aluminum hull with sharp metallic pings. A high-velocity rifle bullet penetrates the starboard landing gear tire. The compressed air inside detonates with a violent crack. The heavy bomber drops slightly on its right axis, continuing to roll while dragging the shredded rubber against the concrete. The kinetic friction generates a trail of white smoke. Mikhail uses absolute kinetic force, utilizing his entire upper body weight to correct the rudder alignment. He forces the nose of the wounded aircraft straight down the primary 1,200-meter runway. The airspeed indicator begins to climb. 80 kilometers per hour, 120, 150. The runway perimeter is chaotic. A German anti-aircraft gun crew scrambles to man a 20mm flak emplacement. They furiously crank the heavy steel barrel around to track the accelerating bomber. The runway distance rapidly decreases. 400 meters remaining. 200 meters. 100 meters. 100 meters. Mikhail pulls back on the control yoke. It refuses to move. The aerodynamic load on the elevator flaps requires over 60 pounds of rearward physical pressure to rotate the nose of the aircraft. Mikhail's arms are experiencing total lactic acid failure. The perimeter fence, laced with high-voltage wire and concrete pylons, fills the entire windscreen. Mikhail abandons the pilot seat backrest. He places both bare feet directly against the instrument panel and rudder pedals. He uses his entire skeletal structure as a mechanical lever. He grips the yoke until his knuckles turn white and hauls backward. The nose remains glued to the concrete. Two prisoners, Ivan and Pyotr, crawl forward from the rear fuselage. They squeeze into the cramped cockpit space beside him. They wrap their emaciated, bleeding hands around the dual control column. Three starving men, combining their final biological energy output against a complex machine designed exclusively for fully nourished Luftwaffe pilots. 50 meters of runway remaining. 30 meters. 20 meters. The elevator flaps finally bite the high-speed airflow. The nose of the bomber violently pitches upward with a convulsive shudder. The internal metal structure groans under the extreme aerodynamic stress. The Heinkel He-1 breaks its kinetic contact with the concrete. It claws into the dense winter air. The compromised starboard landing gear clears the top of the electrified perimeter fence by less than 2 meters. They are airborne. Inside the freezing fuselage, 9 emaciated men collapse onto the ribbed aluminum floor. Below them, the absolute security apparatus of Peenemund shrinks into a heavily armed dot surrounded by the dark Baltic Sea. 10 disposable slaves have successfully stolen the commandant's personal transport aircraft. But breaking the perimeter does not equal survival. Within 90 seconds of liftoff, the Peenemund and the command center broadcasts a priority interception code across all tactical radio frequencies. The Luftwaffe scrambles a squadron of Focke-Wulf 119 interceptors from a nearby mainland airbase. They are the fastest, most heavily armed fighter aircraft in the German arsenal. Their explicit objective is the total atmospheric vaporization of the stolen asset to prevent the compromise of V2 operational security. The Heinkel possesses 0 defensive machine gun turrets. It carries 0 ammunition. It has a blown right tire. Mikhail visually tracks the dark silhouettes of the FW-190s rising from the mainland horizon. He executes a steep, high-G tactical bank to the east. He forces the heavy bomber directly into a dense, low-altitude stratus cloud bank. Visibility instantly drops to absolute 0. The cockpit is enveloped in swirling gray vapor. Mikhail navigates exclusively by a magnetic compass and a stolen Luftwaffe topographic map folded on his lap. The ambient cabin temperature drops below -10 degrees Celsius. The men sit in absolute, terrified silence. They listen to the drone of their own engines, waiting for the inevitable sound of 20mm cannon shells shredding the thin aluminum hull. 20 agonizing minutes elapse. Mikhail drops the aircraft altitude below the cloud base to establish visual contact with the terrain. The airspace behind them is completely empty. The interceptors lost the radar track in the dense cloud cover. They have outrun the immediate pursuit. Mikhail maintains a due east heading, navigating by the position of the winter sun. After 80 minutes of continuous flight time, the topography below drastically changes. The pristine snow is replaced by a massive, scarred network of artillery craters, shattered forests, zigzag trench lines, and burning armor. The Eastern Front. They are crossing the combat zero line. The exact geographic coordinate where Nazi-occupied territory meets Soviet-held land, but the Heinkel is still painted with massive black Luftwaffe crosses on its wings and tail. To every single Red Army anti-aircraft battalion dug into the frozen mud below, this aircraft is a high-value enemy target approaching their lines. The exact moment they breach Soviet airspace, the ground erupts. 37mm anti-aircraft batteries open sustained fire. Black flak bursts bracket the cockpit. High-velocity shrapnel rattles against the fuselage like lethal hail. Mikhail yanks the control column, throwing the bomber into violent evasive maneuvers, bleeding critical kinetic energy to avoid the tracer fire. A high-explosive flak shell detonates directly beneath the starboard wing. The shockwave shatters the internal hydraulic lines. The primary fuel feed severs instantly. The starboard Jumo engine belches thick black smoke, violently shudders, and mechanically seizes. Two prisoners in the rear scream in agony, sustaining deep lacerations from flying metal fragments. Human blood pools on the freezing aluminum floor. The bomber loses 50% of its thrust. It violently yaws to the right. It begins a terminal, uncontrollable spiral toward the frozen Earth. Mikkel fights the dying aircraft with one functioning engine and compromised flight controls. He spots a flat, snow-covered clearing through the smoke-streaked cockpit glass. He cuts the remaining throttle to prevent a catastrophic fuel explosion upon impact. He drops the nose to maintain the minimum aerodynamic stall speed. He lines up the impact vector. 50 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. The wheels slam into the frozen ground. The compromised starboard landing gear snaps instantly upon contact. The metal belly of the Heinkel grinds directly against the solid ice. The kinetic friction creates a massive, violent deceleration force. The fuselage tears through a heavy snowdrift, spins 90 degrees on its axis, and comes to a complete halt. The twisted aluminum structure groans loudly as thermal expansion cools. Absolute silence follows. One by one, 10 men crawl from the shattered debris. They stand in the freezing air, surrounded by the wreckage. They survived the impossible. Soviet infantry units swarmed the crash site within 90 seconds. Mosin Nagant rifles are aimed directly at their heads. Mikhail steps forward, his hands raised. He declares his true identity, his military rank, and explains the impossible extraction from the WWII rocket facility. The Soviet soldiers do not lower their weapons. These men emerged from a destroyed Nazi bomber, wearing the striped rags of concentration camp inmates. Stalinist military doctrine dictates a rigid logic. Any soldier who allowed himself to be captured alive was fundamentally a traitor or an active spy. Miraculous escapes utilizing enemy hardware do not exist in Soviet operational logic. Within 3 hours, all 10 men are locked inside a freezing NKVD interrogation cell. They are classified as potential saboteurs. The interrogators openly mock the bomber theft as a fabricated psychological warfare narrative. For 9 continuous years, Mikhail Deviatayev is blacklisted by his own government. His military records are erased. He is restricted to performing menial physical labor in Kazan. The state that he risked absolute annihilation to return to treats him as a hostile biological asset. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the theft creates a seismic shockwave within the Nazi high command. Hermann Göring orders the immediate court-martial and execution of the WWII commandant. The psychological humiliation of 10 starving laborers defeating the absolute security of the V2 program permanently damages the core myth of Aryan mechanical supremacy. The profound irony of the event remains buried until 1957. After Stalin's death, the Soviet intelligence apparatus finally analyzes the raw data Mikhail Deviatayev brought back in his starving brain. He had memorized the exact geographic launch coordinates. He mapped the facility blueprints. He memorized the specific thermodynamic alloys used in the V2 combustion chambers. He delivered the foundational mathematics of the Nazi rocket program directly to Moscow. Intelligence that Soviet aerospace engineers utilized to reverse engineer their own ballistic missile arsenal. Intelligence that directly ignited the global space race. 10 skeletal figures in a stolen 14-ton machine did not just breach a perimeter fence. They stole the structural blueprint for the Cold War, the most secure military installation on the planet, designed to launch humanity into the stratosphere, was systematically dismantled by a 4mm gap in an aluminum panel pushed open by a man weighing 40 kilograms. The Third Reich engineered the future of warfare, but fundamentally failed to calculate the kinetic output of desperate human biology. Systemic arrogance is always the ultimate vulnerability. If you want to analyze another catastrophic systemic failure, where an inmate manipulated the architecture of Denmark's most secure facility 22 separate times using nothing but dead leaves and a smuggled blade, watch this video next. Welcome to Prison Break Stories.